Giorno transforms into a full-on gangstar as he does battle with Bruno Bucciarati and his stand, the Zipper Man. Greetings, my friends. It's time to give you an offer that you can't refuse. Another review of JoJo's bizarre adventure, Golden Wind. Another crazy, ridiculous, and over-the-top episode which is channeling everything that is awesome about the JoJo anime franchise. And oddly, I think the weirdest thing about this entire episode has to be the ending song that they actually decided to choose for this anime series. I mean, did anybody else expect to hear Jodeci's Freakin' You? I know I sure as hell didn't. What I will say is this episode was absolutely fantastic, just dripping with that JoJo style. Not only did we actually get Giorno's backstory, but we got the continuation of his battle with Bruno Bucciarati, which was absolutely fantastic. So let's talk about all of these amazing scenes. First, the backstory of Giorno. We get to learn that, of course, his father is indeed Dio. They make it very clear at the beginning of the episode, and his mother apparently fled with Giorno to Japan to live a life of debauchery. Basically, his mother is not a very good mom. In fact, his dad's not that much better either. Apparently, his stepfather, who is Italian, basically just used to beat the ever-living shit out of him and treated him like dirt. And while he was going through this life of being constantly ignored by his mother and being abused by his stepfather, he built up something of this callous resistance to the world, to the point where he absolutely feared nothing. And living in Italy at the time, he was surrounded by countless gangsters and mafiosos, and by absorbing this with his being a child who was neglected by his parents, he himself indeed wants to be a gangster. In fact, this entire backstory is oddly reminiscent of the character of Henry Hill from Goodfellas. If any of you have never actually seen that movie, I highly recommend it. It's without a shadow of a doubt my favorite mafia film, but the parallels that I see around this is that we have this young child who grew up abused by his parents, and eventually he discovered the mafia, a life that he wanted to be involved in. He sort of sees them as his heroes. In fact, this all actually happens when he's just walking down the street one day, and he sees this guy who's bleeding out in an alley. These gangsters come around the corner and they're looking for him, and Giorno decides that he's actually going to save this man by telling him that he ran in an opposite direction. This is also when his stand powers actually start to manifest for the very first time, and this guy who's bleeding out in the alley actually recognizes that Giorno saved him and goes out of his way to actually protect him throughout his entire childhood, thanking him, making his father not beat him anymore, and having all of the kids around the neighborhood basically do his bidding. If I can quote Goodfellas for a second, they didn't do it out of fear, they did it out of respect. It was just a really fantastic and short and sweet backstory, and what I love about it is that unlike the other JoJo's from the previous seasons, this one's not exactly a black and white kind of hero. He seems to have good intentions with wanting to genuinely help people and look for the best qualities in people, but he also wants to be a gangster. He's been influenced by this guy who saved his life, who actually does bad things like killing people, but his actual, reason for doing that is because he doesn't want people selling drugs in his town, and Giorno has essentially transformed in that character. He wants to become the next big mafia boss and to stop all of these people who are selling drugs to the children in his town. He wants to be a bad guy and a good guy all at the same time, and honestly, that makes him easily one of the most complex JoJo's that we've actually seen from the series. This backstory, as far as I'm concerned, was pitch perfect, but it's made even better when we finally go back to the battle with Bruno Bucciarati, who uses his stand, which goes by the name of the Zipper Man. That goes perfectly with his abilities, as he's able to basically open up weird zippers in people's bodies and inanimate objects. It allows him to sort of teleport around and to basically dismantle his opponents by turning them into complete ragdolls or inserting weird objects into their body. That's actually how those fingers and that eyeball actually got into the hands of Giorno and inside of his mouth in the last episode, and a big epic battle ensues on this train where we finally get to see two stands colliding in the series, and they both have immeasurably unique abilities. I mean, Bruno's alone really takes the cake for how stylistic it is and how cool it looks when you see the zippers all over people's bodies. Before I go any further into the battle between Giorno Giorno and Bruno, however, let me just say this before I forget this. In the previous seasons of JoJo, the stands a lot of the times would have different names in the subtitles, and a lot of the times this was due to copyright reasons. But even though you can read it in the subs, you can clearly hear the characters actually saying the names of their stands, and while Giorno is using the golden wind throughout most of the episode, you can clearly hear him saying golden experience. If any of you guys actually read the manga of JoJo, let me know if that's actually what's going on here, but I can clearly hear it every single time it's talking. But let's get back to this battle here, which is really unique because the actual golden wind stand seems to have a number of really unique abilities. Not only can it basically transform inanimate objects into living beings, but whenever he actually punches someone, it causes their senses to basically just go insane to the point where they can't concentrate on a battle, and they even have hallucinations and an out-of-body experience of their very own physical form. And that's what actually ends up happening to Bruno Bucciarati in this episode. He actually thinks he has the upper hand in this battle when he gets punched, thinking that he's been imbued with all of this amazing power, when he actually realizes that no, he's losing control of his senses. And this, of course, allows Giorno to get the upper hand in battle and clean his clock in an extremely satisfying and amazing slow-mo punch. Bruno has no choice but to actually escape, but Giorno knows that if he doesn't stop this guy now, he is just going to torture him 24/7. So he starts chasing him through the streets, and eventually he realizes that he's able to use his stand on living bodies, and he can actually go into someone's body and inhabit it and just sort of stay and hide out there. And there are these 4 people that he runs into, and this is where Giorno has to figure out what body he actually slipped into. And the way that he figures this out is by transforming a small little pebble into a fly to mess with one of the guys until eventually Bruno does just erupt from this guy's back in a super, almost mega violent fashion. And that's when the big final standoff goes down between these characters. And this is easily the best part of the episode, as I love that they always change the colors whenever there's like a big, intense battle scene. They did it in Stardust Crusaders. They did it a lot in Diamond is Unbreakable. And again, they're sort of combining the best elements of those 2 seasons and stories, and they're just letting it explode off the screen in this episode right here. So an epic battle ensues between these 2 characters, where at first it really seems like Bruno does have the upper hand. He manages to actually end up getting hit by Giorno's abilities, but this time his senses don't go completely insane, and that's because he can actually take the body parts off of people with his Zipper Man and attach him to his very own form, so that whenever he gets hit, he's not actually going to be affected by anyone's ability, and effectively it's kind of like using a human shield. But the episode continues its absolute awesomeness when Giorno is attacked by him multiple times, with parts of his body starting to fall apart because the zippers are being unzipped, and Giorno ends up taking advantage of this by like sort of ripping and tearing his arm in order to throw it directly into Bruno's face and to actually end up beating him in battle. But this is where Giorno decides that he's sort of done with the fight. He's not going to fight against Bruno anymore, and that's because he sees a lot of good qualities in him. He realizes that he actually wasn't going to kill him or anybody in particular, especially this young kid whose arm that he just ripped off. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he realizes that this kid has actually been doing drugs. You can actually see where the needles have been going in on his arm. Basically, Bruno has a heart of gold. Very much like Giorno, he wants to be a mafia gangster, but he also doesn't want to see the entire mafia gang get completely corrupted by drug dealers. That's when Giorno makes the great declaration that they're not going to fight, they're not going to kill each other. In fact, they're going to end up becoming friends and partners, as Giorno decides that he's going to become a gangstar, take over this guy's mob organization, and become the boss of this city. The episode ends, and then all of a sudden, Freakin' You frickin' plays, and wow, what a weird choice for an ending song. So, what's the rundown on this amazing episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind? This was just one of the best episodes of the entire franchise as far as I'm concerned. The actual battle with Bruno Bucciarati was incredibly invented and actually had me like audibly saying out loud, what the fuck is going on? It was that inventive with what they were actually doing with their abilities. In the previous seasons, watching Jotaro wail on bad guys was always really fun, but for the most part, it was always kind of the same thing, just rapidly punching bad guys, and that's about it. Ever since Diamond is Unbreakable, they've been really creating some amazing and unique stands, and I think this entire battle in this episode fully encapsulated the genius that is the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Whether it's the wacky character designs, the amazing, ridiculous style when they change the colors on everything, or just the amazing slow-motion sequence of watching Bruno Bucciarati get punched in the face, it literally had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was watching this episode with a friend, and we were just absolutely absorbing all of the epicness of this episode. In fact, I now know why a lot of my commenters were saying why the second episode was just going to be so damned entertaining. As for the backstory of Giorno, it's really quick. It's amazing that they actually decided to go through it so fast, and very different than the previous JoJo's from the series, considering that his mother was basically a loose whore, and his father was just an absolute dick. Like I said, a lot of this reminds me of Goodfellas, with a character in the beginning of the story who was also neglected by his father and beaten by him severely until some mobsters decided to beat him up and said, "You're never gonna mess with this kid again." That's actually what ends up happening to Giorno, and I'm really interested to see if this gangster that he met when he was younger is gonna end up becoming an important character in the story. Maybe he's an important mob boss now, and maybe even Giorno's gonna end up having an intense confrontation with this guy. It's amazing that he's been influenced to become something of an honorable thief from all of these events, but man, it just absolutely works in this story and immediately makes it a little more engrossing and different than anything that I've seen from the series thus far. It was also really great to finally see, like, the Golden Wind in action for the very first time. I thought that it really was just going to be sort of a copy of what we'd actually seen before from stuff like Star Platinum, but its abilities are just so unique in the way that they can be used, and I expect to see a lot more creativity from this show. Really, the hype is absolutely through the roof for everything that is Golden Wind. It is also worth mentioning that we finally got our intro for the show, which is awesome. I really love the song itself. I love the whole theme of gold and finally getting to see all of these characters who are just maybe the flashiest that we've actually seen from the franchise thus far. It's really awesome seeing the evolution of JoJo, how it started out so simple and little by little has just exploded into the most manly, flamboyant epicness that I have ever seen. I really can't sell this episode enough. It was just an absolutely amazing anime experience, and it's got me even more hyped for the rest of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. I'm giving this episode a 5 out of 5. JoJo's back, JoJo Fridays are back, and you guys should definitely get hyped. If any of you did watch this episode, I would absolutely love to hear what you thought about it in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. Let's get a discussion about this amazing episode, Giorno's backstory, and the battle with Bruno Bucciarati. Isn't that kind of interesting how in almost every single JoJo series, the first couple of opponents always end up being bad guys, but slowly end up turning into the friends of the main character? That is still one thing that the series is still keeping alive, but for the most part, this is a complete and awesome, unique JoJo experience. So there it is. That's my thoughts on this episode right here. Guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more awesome anime reviews. I am looking at a lot of different shows this season, so make sure to check out the channel and look at all the different playlists. And if you'd like, share this video with some of your friends, like it, you know the whole deal. If you guys already are subscribed, make sure to hit that little bell notification icon. That'll make you a part of the Notification Nation. You'll see when all of my videos are about to be released. So there it is, guys. I will see you all next time. And as always, stay down there, baby.